Okay, well, moving on to something a little more, I suppose, ephemeral in that sense, but also at the same time totally connected to who we are intrinsically, is our genetics. There's been a news story that's come out this month where Ancestry.com have been essentially forced to make a denial that they are abusing their customers' DNA profiles because inside in the contracts that people have been signing when they've been doing DNA tests to check their ancestry, they have essentially signed up to in the small print a clause that grants Ancestry.com a perpetual license to use the customer's genetic material. And this has been supposedly linked with the possibility of the company's terms and conditions, it says here, have stated that users grant the company a perpetual royalty-free, worldwide, sub-licensable, transferable license to their DNA data for purposes of including personalized products and services. Now, and this is, I suppose, of great interest, certainly to me, in so much as people obviously they're fascinated by their own DNA, and since the human genome was mapped, it's become such a I suppose a byword for unlocking mysteries and the untold possibilities that are held within our own cells. And yet here we have this very cold face of the I suppose the the capitalism of genetics as well. And so I don't know. I mean, well, first of all, I suppose have you ever had your DNA tested, Andy?
No, I haven't. I haven't had cause to, thankfully, medically, and certainly and on a historical angle. Uh, I was very struck by an item on Radio 4, program called More or Less, where they look at the use of statistics,
Hmm.
which looked at genetics
Hmm.
and these kind of genetic profiles that people discover that they're 30% Viking, 20% Native American, etc., etc., etc. And just pointing out the sheer number of connections that people have on their family trees once you get back,
Well, they
even just a
do.
few
They do. But this, I suppose. I mean, we'll come back to, I guess, to this question of monetization of someone's genetics in just a moment. But I guess just to try and tackle the historical elephant in the room, this
yeah.
really bothers me because, I mean, actually one of the ways in which Ancestry themselves sell this service is in a series of short TV spots where you have someone's face essentially going from neutral to a look of surprise, sort of
Which
slowly
are
but
often
surely.
sold on the digital and satellite history channels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the sort of and then they go, when and then they say, "This is the moment I discovered I was a Viking," and it is in fact the gross misappropriation and misinterpretation of what on earth that material means, that what these results actually are telling you about your ancestry, in so much as I mean they can be incredibly useful. I mean, for example, I have a friend who was adopted and has found taken great solace in being able to sort of identify, well, actually at some point in my past, my ancestry is in Britain and Ireland, and that at the same time is both satisfying but also very vague. But the next step beyond that is that people seem to want a really specific and also single answer to where their ancestry comes from. And so,
And
sorry, just very quickly,
yeah, sure, yeah.
so it's entirely possible, for example, to have uh, DNA markers in common with people from modern day Scandinavia, or indeed ancient Scandinavia, but have received those markers via someone who was living in Turkey, precisely because those markers can come through to you in a myriad of ways. It's not a simple line from DNA to identity, and I think this is it's a very sexy idea in that sense. It's a very sellable idea, but it's one which I think Ancestry and other companies, I think they sell it short. I think.
I think you're right, and I think there's another issue here that is becoming increasingly a concern, and that's the use of this kind of modern DNA-based research um, by people who want to promote a identity-based nativist political narrative.
Hmm. Hmm.
about that excludes people from outside that genetic line,
Hmm.
shall we
Hmm.
say.
Hmm.
Just this morning before we started this conversation, I noticed another discussion breaking out to that effect on Twitter, and I think so. I mean, I think we have to emphasise here we you know Ancestry.com have not done anything illegal.
No.
What they have done it is quite understandably, because they're a business, they've adopted a business model where they are harvesting a very saleable item. The human genome. If you've got a vast database of people from all over the world, and you can start picking up genetic markers, for example, for susceptibility or resistance to breast cancer, that is an incredibly valuable resource. It could also be used for targeting. I'm not saying that Ancestry.com have done this, but you can see a situation where, for example, they talk about personalised services. You then get you then have popping up on your Facebook feed or your or in your email account an invitation from a private medical company to come and have an MRI scan
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
on a preventive basis. That
Or
you
things like
that,
skin creams, for example, if you might have, if they've identified that you have eczema or whatever, and there's all sorts
precisely
of elements going on.
and that's the danger here.
Yeah, well, and possibly, I suppose, with consent, you could see this as a very convenient thing. Actually,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, for example, Mrs. Soup burns very easily in the sun, and if her genes identify that, then maybe if someone could send her a care package of wonderful sun cream every now and then that's very convenient. But it is, in fact, it's the way in which I suppose it's this double-edged sword. You're sort of, in the case of Ancestry and other services, you are using people's innate curiosity about where they've come from,
Yeah,
uh, and if they're not careful, and of course they can opt out of some of this stuff. I do believe now, certainly in the near future, they'll be able to opt out of this sort of stuff as a result of this story. But if they're not careful, they're also handing over to you literally their blueprint. Yeah, they're saying, "Here you go, this is me." And as essentially a license, a licensable. Thankfully, they haven't said patentable, in so much as I imagine there'd be complications if you were to use more than one service, in that case.
well,
But
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not I think it was an American company that was involved in the human genome mapping try to at one point patent that work,
I think they did. I do believe they did. Yeah, and
and they failed.
yeah, it went nowhere because it's like trying to patent the moon. Um,
But the
and
intent was there, and that's the concern.
yeah, the intent was there, and I suppose this is where I find this very interesting because obviously also as well, frankly, I'm interested in this. If I had the spare cash, I think I probably would go for this. I mean, not necessarily via Ancestry.com. I'd probably go via uh, is it the Oxford Analytics or something? Brian Sykes's company.
Other DNA services are available. I think we should emphasise, but
Oh come on, we're not a public broadcast service. Oxford Ancestors, that's the one that I would go by, yeah, if I could. That's my personal. There you go. Is that okay, Andy? That's my personal opinion. But if only because then actually, yes, I am signing up for him and his company to be able to keep a copy of my DNA, but it's actually helping broader genetic research. Sykes is the name when it comes to especially mapping the broad movement of people, for example, in prehistory,
yes.
and more recently he came up with, for example, the Seven Daughters of Eve, the research linked with mitochondrial DNA, so on and so forth. So that's the company which I go by. But unless you're still essentially handing over this information, and I suppose I don't know, it just I think it's interesting that it just feels um, it's a very particular set of emotions and sensations that come about with this particular idea because also in some ways it's such an abstract. Most people would go, well, it's not like you can read your DNA. It's not like you can, it is in that sense an abstract thing. It's saliva.
I think though, and I think it's the point I'd maybe like to conclude with on this. There's a lot of talk about big data and data analysis, and there's a a controversy at the moment over the use of data, for example, by the parts of the Brexit campaign last year,
Mm-hmm.
where a Canadian company was used to harvest data from social media and then target advertising, political advertising during the Brexit campaign. We're seeing that again this time around with. I don't know about you, but I've certainly had political ads popping up in my Facebook feed.
Mm-hmm. Also on
Some
YouTube, I'm being
and
bombarded at the moment.
absolutely, everybody's doing it, and again, we're not. There's no proof at the moment anyone's doing anything illegal. But when it comes to DNA, I'm reminded of the case, the Ashley Madison hack, and certainly, particularly, and the data again. I think I'm right in saying that Ancestry.com has said that the data is anonymized
Mm.
when it's moved on. But at some point, you can imagine if their databases, for example, were to be, or a database of a company like them, shall we say,
Mm-hmm.
were to be hacked, and DNA data with names attached and addresses and email addresses attached somehow found its way onto the markets of the dark web. You've got the opportunity there for people to be blackmailed, to be targeted by commercial companies, cold calling and whatever. It's a potentially serious privacy issue, apart from anything else.
No, that's certainly true, definitely, and I suppose it's one that's only going to become more and more potent as these services become less expensive, as the applications of one's DNA becomes more, I suppose, more
Practical.
well, yeah, in that sense, yeah, and also more as it were usable in that, because at the moment it feels very much as though we're still kind of experimenting by turning off things, and it's the turn off a gene here or turn on a gene there. But when we have a much more subtle understanding of what the human genome is, presumably these services are going to become much more subtle and nuanced in how they handle it.
And the products that are based on, again, somebody may be genetically prone to, as you say, some eczema or allergies or something like that. So you have someone develops the project that you can have prescribed to you or over the counter that will solve that particular issue. That is a potentially a huge money maker. So.
Yeah. What's interesting here, I'll just sort of finish on this point for myself. Debbie Kennett says here, genetics researcher at the University College London, welcomed the aim of building a large global database. And she says, for genealogy purposes, what we really want and rely on is the power of large data sets. So in that sense, again, I would encourage you to, I personally would try and contribute to a reputable data set. A DNA test on its own, without such a large comparable data set, is essentially useless, as she says. So in that sense, yes, I mean, by definition, we have to contribute to a database in order to be able to learn anything about the groups that we are connected to. But I guess the moral of the story is just be careful, I guess.
Yeah.
And read the small print.
And read the small print.
Yeah, read the small print. Yeah, for example, I mean, most people don't quite realise that when they're watching the watching brief, they're actually signing up to give us 10% of their will. Did you know that? So moving on from what is plainly a ridiculous statement, let's take a look at. I suppose
everybody watching Mark was joking.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I can just imagine.
You can watch anywhere in the world, anytime in the world you want to, for nothing.
Yeah, there's no limits. We won't take any money.